So how would you convince a reluctant partner to get on board with FIRE?
We never had that happen to us, did we?
Are you being sarcastic?
We learned a lot about this because we were not on the same path for a long time, and trying to get on the same path was difficult. But we definitely have some tips to share with you.
How did you get me on board then, Alan?
Number one, I think, is start with the why. Why are we doing this? Where are we going? What's the big vision of life that you want to get to together? And the really important bit is, if you're the person trying to persuade the other person, is do not just pitch your why, understand their why first.
I think you have to build it together, and if you want to stay together as a couple, you need to constantly be growing together and deciding together what life looks like. You can't have one person dictating how that's going to be. You have to create it together.
Which then brings us on to the second tip, which is start with understanding. Like, most people want to batter financial independence into their partner, but you've actually got to start with understanding, which, like, it could be understanding the money beliefs from childhood.
Yeah, which a great question that we've discovered of how to start that conversation is, what did your parents teach you about money? What was their relationship like and when you were a kid? And that's a much softer way to start the topic rather than, what do you believe about money? Why are you being weird? To understand their upbringing and to understand the environment that they grew up in really helps to then understand the way that they're behaving, the way that they think when it comes to finances.
So if you can understand the other person and create a why, then you can start getting to the details of tracking where your finances go and everything else. If you start with, you must track your finances, it's going to go badly.
What's the number one thing that most couples do wrong when it comes to their finances?
Me personally, I believe the most damaging thing you can do is put one person in charge and then the other person just lets go of it. I've seen it happen with my parents. My dad was in charge of the money and he completely messed it up, and my mum had nothing to do with it, and eventually it ripped them to pieces. I've seen this with so many couples, so many things. They're like, oh, the man deals with the money or the woman deals with the money, and the other person doesn't even have any interest. And it just ends up causing fights and problems.
Yeah, because if the person that's in charge of the finances does something that means they lose some of the money, then the person that wasn't involved could turn around and say, well, you've made a mistake and you did this and you did that. The other thing that happens is what happens when they part ways. Either the relationship ends or everyone dies one day. So the person that's left behind, if that's the person that didn't have anything to do with the finances, how are they going to know what to do, how to manage the money? They're going to be left not knowing. And
you end up being financially dependent on the other person. And the whole point of this journey is to be financially independent. So if we could advise you of anything, it is work to do this together.
Because then you're both equally responsible for the outcomes, for the failures, for the successes, and for what happens as a team.
Financial disagreement with each other? How did you get past it?
We've never had an argument about money before, have we?
We never argue ever.
One was actually buying these things.
The Fitbits.
Back in the day, I really wanted a Fitbit because I thought if we had one, we would track our steps, we'd do more exercise, we'd be healthy. I'd been speaking about it for a long time. We eventually got to the shop and I was like, let's buy it. You did not want to, did you?
No. I was like, that's a lot of money. We don't need them. I always had this thing about, if I can avoid spending money, I will. So if it's a want rather than a need, as I perceive it, then it's not necessary and we don't need to spend that money.
And we had a huge argument because I was like, we were 70%, 60% of our way to financial independence. We were hugely wealthy, and it's like, I can afford a Fitbit. Like, it will infinitely make our lives better and track my health and it'll be useful. But it all blew up. Like, we had a major meltdown that day and ended up on other sides of the stores. And we had to overcome it, discuss it, unpack it, and try and work out, like, why did this happen? And do we really need to worry about that granularity of finances, or will we be okay?
And I think you learnt to Drip feed it coming up.
Yes. Start telling your partner about purchases you want to make, maybe a year in advance.
Oh, not a year. You're being mean. I'm going to have an argument right now.
Ask another question quick.
We're just going to see how it goes. Is money a loaded topic for you? How do you talk about it with your partner?
I don't think it was ever really a loaded topic for us. We've had arguments about it, but we've always talked about it. We've talked about what we earn, what we do with it, where it goes with it. And we always had this vision, even before we knew about financial independence, of working on our finances together. And I think I'd watched my parents royally screw up their finances in so many ways. I never wanted that to happen to us. So I was driven from the start that we're going to sort this out together.
Once we had the common goal of working towards financial independence, it actually brought us closer together. We would go for long walks around Basingstoke, figuring out how are we going to do this bit? How does this bit work? How can we optimize our tax position? All these fun topics. We really enjoyed talking about it, and it was something that brought us together, and it was a game, it was a puzzle to be solved, and we both worked really well together, brought different aspects and different skill sets and different mindsets to it in order to accelerate our time to get to financial independence.
And that joint vision of financial independence drove us for years to work towards it, and it was one of the most fun journeys we've been on.
What are your closing thoughts for couples out there?
You are never going to be on the same page financially, emotionally, and values from day one. Once the honeymoon period has worn off, that first 6 months, 9 months of lust, then you're going to have to find the other things underneath it. So you're going to have to go, what are our shared values? What are we aiming for? How are we working together? And if you can do that, that's the real stuff that creates a relationship over the long term.
And it's not a one and done. It's something that you have to keep revisiting every so often, every quarter, every month, whatever it is, but it's something that you continually need to talk about to make sure that you're growing together rather than apart.
So this can be one of the most fun journeys you ever go on as a couple.